Mookie Betts at shortstop. Okay, he came up that way in the minors to some extent, but let's look at how many games he played at the position last year when he played short for the first time as a major leaguer. Just 14 games. Welcome everyone to this week's edition of Fair Territory. We've got a great show this week, and we're not just talking about the usual stuff. Blake Snell, Jordan Montgomery, JD Martinez. No, we have actual baseball stuff to talk about. Two of the biggest names in the game. I'm talking, of course, about Mookie Betts and Joey Votto. And the reason I'm talking about them, well, entirely different reasons, actually. But the one thing they share in common is their love and passion for the sport of baseball. And we often talk as fans and media, hey, these guys are playing a little boy's game. They should be happy about that. Well, guess what? Mookie Betts, what he's doing by moving to shortstop, he says it makes him feel like a little boy again. Joey Votto, what he's doing, taking a minor league deal with the Blue Jays at the age of 40, he says it makes him feel like a little kid again too. Well, this is what it's all about. Backdrop of Mookie's story is that it's not a kid's game, right? This is a $1 billion offseason for the Dodgers, and they still have not solved shortstop. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, but they thought they had solved shortstop. They thought this was going to be the year Gavin Lux, coming off an injury, was finally going to establish himself at the position. He was once one of the game's top prospects. He's a kid who can really hit, but he has a problem that we've seen from time to time over the years, and it's really disconcerting when this surfaces. It's the yips. And if you don't know what the yips are, it's when a player, a pitcher, or an infielder suddenly develops the inability to throw to the base, or first base in most cases, properly. It's a weird thing, but it happens. And it seems that Lux is in the middle of another case of the yips. This is not the first time for him. So the Dodgers, instead of turning to Miguel Rojas, instead of turning to maybe Kike Hernandez, they've decided to install Mookie Betts at shortstop. Their arguably best player. I know they have Shohei Ohtani, but Mookie, let's face it, great all-around player. If he's not their best player, he's one of their three best players. We can argue this until we're blue in the face. Mookie Betts at shortstop. Okay, he came up that way in the minors to some extent, but let's look at how many games he played at the position last year when he played short for the first time as a major leaguer. Just 14 games. 65 games at second base, 98 at right field, the position where he has won Gold Gloves and done great things. So here are the Dodgers, and they're taking a bit of a risk here. The risk is that shortstop is a physically demanding position, and that perhaps Mookie will be more inclined or more exposed to injury playing that spot. Now, he was going to be their primary second baseman. That too is a demanding infield position, though not quite as demanding, not demanding as much range necessarily as short. So this was going to happen in the infield in one sense or another, but shortstop is a different beast. And it's interesting because Mookie last year, when I asked him about playing the infield, why he preferred it, or he at least enjoyed it, he said, hey, count the steps from our dugout, which was on the third base side of Dodger Stadium, to right field. He goes, and then count the steps from our dugout to second base. It's a lot fewer steps. Simple math. Well, the steps are even fewer to shortstop from the Dodgers dugout on the third base side of Dodger Stadium. And yes, that does save some wear and tear. It's not nothing. But at the same time, there's movement that might not exist in right field either, at least more regular movement. So there is some risk here. Permanent for now. That's the phrase Dave Roberts used. Might be the first great phrase of the 2024 season. Because, of course, it's an oxymoron. You can't have it permanent, and you can't have it just permanent for now. It doesn't work that way. But that's the way he said it. And I believe he said it because he wants to keep other options open. So Mookie is there unless they get a better solution. Who might that better solution be? Look over to Milwaukee. Willy Adames, potential free agent, a guy who has been rumored in trade, though not lately, and a guy that Milwaukee seemingly at this point is disinclined to trade. They don't want to do it. But keep in mind, they didn't want to trade Corbin Burnes either. And eventually, the Orioles stayed with their price, and eventually the Brewers said, you know what, we'll do that deal for DL Hall, for Joey Ortiz, and a draft pick. Maybe the Dodgers simply have to raise the price to get Willy Adames. Maybe the Brewers truly do not want to change things up in that fashion this late in spring training. but they have other alternatives in the infield. They could play Bryce Terang at short. They could play Frelick at second or third. They have a number of other third basemen in camp, Monasterio, guys that they can use. So I'm not ruling this out. I forgot Christian Arroyo. He's also part of their equation. Owen Miller. There are a number of infielders in their mix. None as good as Willy Adames. Okay, we all get that. But they traded Burns. Maybe permanent for now will again become impermanent, and Mookie will go back to second base. All right, that is one guy we wanted to talk about. And the reason I talk about players playing a little boy's game is because Mookie said earlier in the spring to me that when he played the infield last year, he felt like a kid again. He felt like he did growing up in Nashville when he would play all kinds of positions, when in his mind he was a baseball player, not tied to any one position. The other guy who feels like a kid again, that's Joey Votto. And Joey Votto this week signed a minor league contract with the Toronto Blue Jays. The great Joey Votto, a likely Hall of Famer, signed a minor league deal. And Joey Votto is coming off two below average seasons by his standards. You can see the numbers here. And the reason for this, the 712 OPS, the 204 batting average, really goes back to his shoulder surgery. He was out almost a year, from August 2022 to June 2023. He is 40 years old, and yet he is willing to start in the minors for a chance to ultimately get a spot on their bench as a left-handed bat. The guy he likely would have to beat out over the long haul is Daniel Vogelbach. Could he do it? I don't know. We'll see. But the cool thing about this, and why Joey Votto says he feels like a boy again, feels like a kid, is because he's taking a chance here. He is trying, going back to the grassroots of his career, hanging out with the minor leaguers, probably starting off in the minor leagues, and he feels like he doesn't want to retire until he knows, until he feels more certain, maybe he'll never feel completely certain, that he no longer can be a viable major league player. He believes it's still in there. He believes the shoulder surgery cost him the last 2 years, and he wants to get back. He wants to go out, if he has to go out, on his own terms. Now, it won't necessarily end that way. Let's say he gets released and it doesn't work. He's not going out on his own terms from a technical standpoint. But he is in the sense that he took his last shot. He wants to do this, and more power to him. It's one of the cooler stories we've had in a while, and Joey's quotes being just so grateful for another opportunity were really cool to hear. And you might have saw what he said to Trent Rosecrans of The Athletic. He feels like he can still bang. Mookie Betts feels like a kid again. Joey Votto feels like a kid again. Players all over Florida and Arizona feel like kids again. That's the beauty of this great game. Time now for the Inside Dish, the segment where every week we go inside a story I've written or inside a trend in the game. Inside maybe something else going on at Fox. I don't know. Could be anything. But this week it is about a story that I wrote last week with Eno Saris of The Athletic. It came out on Friday. It is the one in which we spoke with Dr. Keith Meister, the Rangers team physician and perhaps the leading orthopedic surgeon in the sport, about the rash of pitching injuries, which we seem to deal with every season in this sport. It's something that's incredibly troubling. It's something that, in Keith Meister's view, in my view, needs to be addressed. You can see a list of players here, if you're watching on YouTube, of guys who already are injured, or at least from 2023 to the present, and that is just a partial list. Now, it's interesting how this story came about because every once in a while, you sort of run into something by accident. And when I called Dr. Keith Meister, I was actually calling about a pitcher on the Minnesota Twins, Chris Paddack. He is re-entering the rotation this year. He came back with the Twins last year from his second major elbow surgery as a reliever. He was quite dominant in the playoffs against Houston. And now he's back. He's very excited. He's going to be a big part of what Minnesota does. And his surgeon, like so many players, is Dr. Keith Meister. So I texted the doctor, asked him if I could speak with him. And as we spoke, we talked a little bit about Paddack, but then we got into something that we had spoken about a couple of months ago as well. But at the time, I wasn't really ready to write it. It was really kind of right in the middle of the off season. And he started talking again about what he believes to be a major problem. The over-reliance by some pitchers on the sweeper and on what he called the movement changeup or the power changeup, as we call it. And he said that those two pitches in his mind are as big a culprit, if not a bigger culprit, than what we commonly believe to be the major driver of injuries, which is velocity. Pitchers are throwing harder than ever. They also are throwing more breaking balls than ever, and this combination, along with what Dr. Meister is saying, has created yet another major issue for the sport. Now, the sweeper is an interesting thing, right? We know that pitchers have always thrown sweepers, and one of the initial complaints when the pitch started being classified that way is that, hey, it's a slider, pitchers have always thrown sliders, but it's a slider with great horizontal break. And while it's a pitch that has always been thrown, there are differences now in the way it is being used. And the differences are two things. One, pitchers are throwing it, certain pitchers, more often because of the analytical theory that, hey, if you have a pitch that works, keep going to it. Go, go, go. Use it as much as possible. We've seen that not just with sweepers, of course, but other pitches as well. And it is, in theory, a good plan. If you've got a knockout pitch, keep throwing it. The other difference is the way pitchers approach the game today. They throw the ball as hard as possible. They grip the ball as hard as possible, and that creates great strain on their arms. So while in theory, from an analytical standpoint, it's a great idea to keep throwing your sweeper if you've got a good one, in reality, there's an unintended consequence. And that unintended consequence, at least in Dr. Meister's opinion, and I believe we should listen to him since he's like the main guy here. He's the guy who pioneered the internal brace procedure, kind of a hybrid procedure, Tommy John plus a brace. He's an expert. And if he's saying it, people should take it seriously. Even the analysts who might be offended that one of their theories is kind of being questioned here. So that is what we discussed. And it comes down to the question, as a lot of people have put to me, of performance versus availability. Do you want extreme performance at the expense of a pitcher's availability? Too often in the game today, the answer teams give you is, we want performance, and we're not so worried about availability. But one of Meister's points is that eventually you're going to run out of arms this way. And in my broadcasts on Fox with John Smoltz, he often speaks of this same thing, and it bothers him to no end. The idea that you can just run through pitchers, have this guy throw 100, blows out, bring the next guy throwing 100. And it's just not the way the game should be. So that is the way the story developed. And I honestly think that it's one of the more important stories we've done in a while because it quoted a key figure, an important person in the sport, Dr. Keith Meister, on this issue. He was on the record. He was absolutely not at all hesitant to go on the record. And he dealt with something that a lot of people are talking about maybe behind the scenes, but are not necessarily inclined to say publicly. And I was in a camp today in Florida. I'm in Palm Beach Gardens right now, kind of working the east coast of Florida. And a pitcher told me he read the article and he thought the doctor was dead on. I talked with an agent today. He read the article. He thought the doctor was dead on as well. So while we have certain theories born out of analytics that certainly work, we know that at some point in this sport, we have to get to a point where we're worried about availability too. And maybe it's a greater emphasis on location over stuff that has to happen. The Rays kind of are leaning in that direction. If you see some of the moves that they've made in recent years, Savali, Maton, some others as well. Now, even pitchers who rely on location, Jeffrey Springs, for example, the Rays left-hander, get hurt. Pitchers get hurt in all kinds of ways, throwing it soft, throwing it hard. It doesn't seem to matter. But if there are ways to maybe change things up, to alleviate the wave of injuries, the scourge on the sport, those things should be looked at. And MLB is looking at it. Dr. Keith Meister, in my view, deserves applause and credit for going on the record and bringing this to people's attention. And I'm not saying this because Eno and I were the ones who wrote this. He actually said it to the Dallas Morning News in kind of a different framework as well the day before. This is something that cannot be ignored. It's something that needs to be addressed. And frankly, the sooner, the better. Time now for the Dude of the Week. And it was a tough choice this week because the two guys we talked about in the opening segment both are worthy dudes of the week. But I'm going to go with Mookie Betts. because what Mookie Betts is doing, at least permanently for now, is moving from right field or second base to shortstop, which is one of the most difficult positions in the sport to play. And he's doing it at a time in his career when he is an established superstar. And he's doing it in the middle of spring training. And he's doing it without complaint. Usually, when guys switch positions in their 30s, they're moving to an easier place on the defensive spectrum. Mookie's going the other way. He's going to a more difficult place. And he told me earlier in the spring in an interview I did for Fox Sports that will air later this year that he wants to be a legend in the game. Not just a Hall of Famer. He wants to be remembered as a legend in the game. I would suggest that he already will be remembered that way, but stuff like this makes him even more legendary. When he talked about that, he was actually referring to kind of an off-the-field presence, talking with kids and being that kind of person. But my goodness, when you're a legend in the game, you're a legend essentially because of what you do on the field. What Mookie Betts does on the field on a regular basis is absolutely remarkable. Dork of the Week, of course I could go with Angel Hernandez for his stunt the other night, throwing Lance Lynn out of a game, not once, but twice. But I trust that Angel will be Dork of the Week material at various points during the regular season. Oh, he'll be honored. Don't worry about that. Dork of the Week this week is going to go to a guy who just got suspended 80 games for violating the sport's joint drug policy. That would be Cincinnati Reds infielder Noelvi Marte. All the information is available to players. They can get it from their athletic trainers. They can get it from doctors. The list is clear on what is banned. There is no secret here. And yet players still get banged every so often for using PEDs. And surely there are more out there who are not getting caught. But Noelvi Marte, here's a guy with great promise, a guy who now will have a cloud over him, at least for a good bit. 80 games is half a season. And when you're a young player, you can't lose time. So Noelvi Marte figured to be a big part of what the Reds were going to do this year. It's a team that seemingly had an infield surplus. Now, not so much of a surplus, but regardless, he's Dork of the Week. Time now for Grilling Ken. Let's get to your questions. Some good ones this week. First question comes from Mad King Tyler. I guess a Tyler McGill fan. He asks, should the Red Sox pursue a low-cost starter option like Michael Lorenzen instead of the high-dollar options of Montgomery and Snell? This, Mad King Tyler, is a better question for Red Sox ownership because they don't seem to be pursuing any options. They've been in contact with Montgomery, but if they were going to sign him, I imagine maybe it would have happened by now. How much more are they going to wait, or how much longer? As for Lorenzen, it makes sense to me, maybe a little bit more sense, because you're already playing from behind here. Giolito was a guy you counted on for innings. You're short on innings in your rotation. Everything has to go right for you even to cover what you should be covering, and I'm not even sure they can pull that off with this current group. So Lorenzen is a guy who you would think could give you 150. Certainly, that should be a reasonable range for him, and it's not going to cost what Jordan Montgomery is going to cost. If I'm a Red Sox fan, though, I'm thinking, no, let's sign Jordan Montgomery, and even if this year is lost to a certain extent, playoff odds aren't going to be great in the AL East. You've got him for next year, and at that point, you can hopefully go forward in a better way. It's not something the Red Sox ownership seems inclined to do. It's something that in the past they might have done, but this one, I'm not quite clear on where they're going with this. I don't know why they've conducted themselves in this fashion. I understand better what the Mets are doing. They've got this huge payroll, and they want to bring it down, maybe get under the luxury tax next year, and build with their kids who should be starting to filter to the major leagues this year and then beyond. But the Red Sox, I don't see the same kind of plan here. They have young kids too, and they're excited about them, but where is the pitching? That's my question. The next one comes from the Mike Lunardi, who asks, what's the current timeline for expansion to 32 teams? Is Montreal a likely city? The Commissioner, Rob Manfred, addressed this question recently, and he said basically with the RSN situations, with so many teams being uncertain, with the league trying to get a handle on the streaming and what it's going to look like in the future, it's kind of a one problem at a time scenario for the league, and he doesn't want to get to expansion until he gets this straightened out. But it seems that from what he said, he wants the teams or the cities to be identified by the time his term ends 5 years from now. He doesn't necessarily expect those teams to begin play by then, but it would seem to me that in the next 2-3 years, they're going to figure out which cities. Montreal is a sentimental choice for many of us who were around when the Expos were playing and we were covering them and going to Montreal. That was a fun place and a great baseball town until the strike, which wrecked it. But I don't see Montreal as a favorite. Nashville, to me, is a favorite, and that would be the Eastern team. And then there would be one in the West as well, whether it's Portland, Sacramento, Salt Lake City perhaps, maybe even Oakland. But that would seem to be the way the league is going to go. One in the East, one in the West. Nashville, much more likely, in my view, than Montreal. And our final question comes from Joe Sorosky, who asked, do you think the free agent market this year causes some players to consider signing extensions they would not have considered prior? Excellent question, Joe. I was asked this on Foul Territory last week. We were talking about Scott Boras. And AJ Przinsky asked, did I think Boras would be more inclined to sign extensions? And I said no. That's not his style. He prefers players to go to the open market. That's just the way he does it. He wants their values established, not by one team, but by all 30. Other agents, however, in reaction to this market, might take a different view. There are always agents who are inclined or willing to sign extensions, but the way things are going, I would expect that certain players and certain agents might look at it and say, I'm not so sure I want to wait. Maybe we should go now. Now, the caveat here is that this is a weird market. This market has been influenced by the RSN situation that has affected a number of teams. It's been influenced by the Mets, the Red Sox, the Padres not spending the way they normally have in the past. So you've got maybe half the teams kind of in a withdrawn state. It's not going to be that way every year. So free agency is going to be good again, and I've talked about this as well. Boras has a zillion great players next year. Not a zillion, about a half dozen. And he's going to hit the jackpot with them, I believe. So it remains to be seen how this affects things, but I don't know that I would overreact if I were an agent or a player to this year's market because it seems to be such an aberration. I want to thank everyone for their questions. Thank everyone for watching, for listening. You know where to find us. YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Subscribe to us, like us, find us however you can, but just do it in an urgent fashion. You have to find us. Hey, we'll be back next week with another show. I want to thank everyone again. Have a great week.
Place your first BetMGM Sportsbook wager through the app of at least $5. You will receive $150 instantly in additional winnings, regardless of your wager's outcome. Got to use the bonus code FOUL, F-O-U-L, when you download the app. And you're a new customer, sign up and deposit at least $5 into the account. Place a wager in the amount of at least $5 at standard odds price. And once you place that bet, you'll receive $150 in bonus bets, regardless of the outcome of your wager. Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hey everybody, be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Fair Territory airs each week, and we'd love for you to become a part of our community. Here's another video you might enjoy. See you next time.